Attendant, says black woman, can't afford first class, gets fired after she shows her badge. From the moment Serena Walker stepped into the sleek corridors of John F. Kennedy International Airport, she felt an unsettling tension in the air, an unspoken challenge that threatened to derail her journey before it even began. Armed with a first-class ticket she'd worked years to afford, she was determined that nothing would stand in her way. However, an offhand comment from a flight attendant would soon explode into a storm of prejudice, humiliation, and triumph that no one on board could have anticipated. Little did they know, Serena held more power than the uniformed staff realized, and her reveal would change everything. Serena Walker was born on a warm spring afternoon in Atlanta, Georgia. Her parents, Marcia and John Walker, were high school teachers who believed fiercely in the power of education. Serena spent her weekends curled up in her father's arms as he read her stories of civil rights heroes from Martin Luther King Jr. to Thurgood Marshall. Their words stirred her young imagination, fueling the embers of a determination that would guide her entire life. Growing up, Serena was the kid who always asked why. Why did some families seem to struggle so much when others thrived? Why did the world still feel divided even though segregation was over? Why was she treated differently by some teachers, neighbors, and even strangers in grocery stores, for reasons she couldn't quite grasp at the time? Every question she asked was met with patient, honest answers from her parents. They encouraged her to question the world, but also taught her to channel her anger and confusion into something constructive. As a child, Serena found solace in books and research. She devoured texts on law, social justice, and biographies of black trailblazers who broke barriers in politics, academia, and science. By the time she reached high school, Serena had a fascination with how laws shape societies and how critical it was to ensure those laws were fairly enforced. Her dream crystallized around the idea of becoming someone who could uphold justice, not just speak about it. That dream led her straight to the criminal justice program at a local university where she excelled academically. She landed an internship with the Atlanta Police Department during her junior year of college. Though it was only a summer opportunity, Serena poured her entire being into learning from experienced officers and detectives. She quickly discovered the adrenaline rush and sense of purpose that came from investigating crimes, protecting citizens, and most importantly, making sure justice was served regardless of someone's socio-economic status or skin color. She saw that while many officers aimed to do good, there was also corruption, implicit bias, and prejudice woven into the system. She vowed she would never let that darkness consume her. She would always shine a light on wrongdoing, no matter where it came from. When Serena graduated with honors, she went on to join a federal agency, an achievement that made her parents beam with pride. Her father called it the culmination of her childhood mission. Serena wasn't one to tout her own accolades. She carried herself with humility, preferring people to see her actions before her titles. Yet, her rising star status in her agency didn't go unnoticed among her peers. She was a formidable investigator, known for her intellect, empathy, and unyielding tenacity in pursuing justice. Beyond her professional life, Serena was a regular woman with regular dreams. She loved to dance, cook elaborate dinners for her family, and binge-watch crime documentaries on streaming services. But she never lost sight of the struggles that shaped her. She refused to let the success of her adult life erase the challenges of her youth, the microaggressions and blatant racism she endured. She promised herself that whenever she encountered discrimination or bigotry, she would face it head-on, with truth on her side. That promise would be tested in ways she never expected on a flight from JFK to Los Angeles. By then, Serena had earned enough rewards points and saved enough money to fly first class, a small treat after years of grueling work. She had no idea a seemingly ordinary trip would thrust her into a confrontation that would test every fiber of her resolve. Fate was about to hand Serena Walker a spotlight she never asked for, but would use to illuminate the very issues she'd spent her life fighting against. The trip from New York City to Los Angeles wasn't an ordinary one for Serena. She was heading to a pivotal conference hosted by law enforcement officials, policymakers, and community leaders. The conference's aim was to discuss actionable reforms to curb institutional bias and promote transparent policing practices across the country. Serena wasn't just attending, she had been invited to be a panelist, an honor she treated with seriousness and humility. While Serena usually preferred to travel in coach to remain fiscally prudent, this time felt different. She had recently closed a high-profile case that had her working 70-hour weeks for months. Her superiors recognized her dedication, awarding her with some of the highest commendations in her department and a handsome bonus. Coupled with the credit card miles she had accumulated over relentless business travel, Serena decided it was time to allow herself a bit of luxury. Days before her flight, Serena booked a Delta Airlines first-class seat. It wasn't merely about indulging in extra legroom or a gourmet meal. She saw it as a milestone. Growing up, she'd watched her father meticulously budget summer road trips because flying was cost-prohibitive. Her mother once told her, "Someday, you'll sit in first class, baby. And it won't be luck, it'll be your hard work that puts you there." Serena clung to those words as proof that she was indeed progressing. She imagined calling her parents once she settled into her plush seat, letting them share in that triumph. Though Serena had traveled often for work, it was almost always in cramped economy seats, stoically enduring red-eye flights to save her agency money. The idea of traveling in comfort felt like a small but significant victory. She had earned it. The timing was perfect, too, as Serena needed a moment to decompress before diving into the serious topics at the Los Angeles conference. She looked forward to sipping a warm cup of tea while reviewing her speaking notes in a peaceful environment, something she rarely had time to do. Yet, in the days leading up to the trip, Serena experienced a few unsettling encounters that gnawed at her subconscious. While shopping for a new business blazer, she overheard a customer making a snide remark about how some people just don't belong in high-end stores. She felt the sting of that comment but chose not to engage, reminding herself she had bigger battles to fight. Then, at a dinner with peers, a newly hired agent made an offhand joke about Serena's ability to afford nice things given her background. He'd laughed it off, but the comment lingered. Serena responded with a simple line, "Anyone can afford anything they're willing to work for." Still, she tried to keep her spirits high. The upcoming conference was a critical platform to advocate for the changes she believed in so strongly. She was not going to let petty judgments or microaggressions derail her. She'd faced worse, much worse on the job. She'd been in life-threatening situations, pursued dangerous suspects, and negotiated with criminals. What could possibly happen on a simple flight? On the morning of her departure, Serena woke up early, as was her routine. She double-checked her itinerary, confirmed her seat assignment, and did a final rundown of her presentation. She was as prepared as she could be. But fate had a knack for challenging her in ways she couldn't foresee. Little did she know how drastically her flight to Los Angeles would shape the discourse she would bring to that conference, or how it would shine a spotlight on the very issues she planned to address from the stage. That sense of crossing a threshold lingered as Serena grabbed her suitcase. Stepping outside her apartment, she inhaled the brisk New York air, smiled softly, and reminded herself that this trip was one more step forward, one more milestone. She had no way of knowing how quickly the hope of a peaceful, luxurious journey would be stolen from her, and how she'd be forced to fight for her dignity at 35, feet. The day of Serena's flight arrived with a crisp, clear dawn over New York City. The sun cast a golden hue across the skyline as her rideshare car wound through the early morning traffic toward John F. Kennedy International Airport. Serena gazed out the window, her mind straddling between the excitement of the upcoming conference and the mental checklist of tasks she still had to finalize. She recalled each bullet point of her panel discussion, anticipating questions about race relations, accountability, and social justice questions that had defined her career. When her driver pulled up to Terminal 4, Serena felt that familiar hum of anticipation, mixed with just a dash of nerves. The check-in area was already bustling with travelers and airport staff. Families corralled children around the baggage drop. Business people tapped away on their phones while balancing coffee cups and rolling briefcases, and couples spoke in hushed tones about their upcoming vacations. Serena took it all in with an observant eye, a habit from her investigative training. She walked confidently to the first-class check-in counter. The agent at the desk, a young man with a courteous smile, greeted her politely. Serena handed over her ID and ticket confirmation. He typed away at his computer, verifying her seat and printing her boarding pass. "Welcome to Delta Airlines, Miss Walker," he said, handing her the pass and directing her to the TSA pre-check line. His warm professionalism put Serena at ease. She thanked him and moved on. The security line breezed by, a small perk of her TSA pre-check status. She placed her laptop in a separate bin and walked through the metal detector without issue. As she retrieved her belongings, Serena caught sight of a small group of flight attendants heading to their designated gates. She'd always admired their polished composure. While Serena didn't envy the job, considering the irregular hours and responsibility of managing so many personalities at once, she appreciated their role in making air travel smooth and safe. At that moment, she couldn't predict that one of those polished uniforms would soon become her adversary. With time to spare before boarding, Serena made a beeline for an airport cafe that offered fresh pastries and the kind of chai latte she loved. She ordered her drink and sat at a small table, taking a moment to savor the calm. People watching was a favorite pastime of hers. Her gaze scanned the terminal, a young soldier in uniform bidding goodbye to his tearful mother, a couple passionately debating their itinerary in Los Angeles, a group of fashion-forward influencers snapping photos in the wide corridors. Each of them was heading somewhere for a different reason, carrying personal stories, joys, and anxieties. Serena glanced at her watch. Boarding would start soon. She gathered her belongings and made her way to Gate B23. The lounge area around the gate was moderately crowded. Some people dozed in chairs, while others huddled around charging stations to juice up their phones and laptops. A middle-aged gate agent, presumably the one who would scan boarding passes, announced that first-class passengers and those needing additional time to board would be invited onto the aircraft first. Serena felt a flicker of excitement. Flying first class still felt foreign to her, in a thrilling way. But as she stepped closer to the gate, she noticed a slight chill in the air. Was it just her imagination? A gate attendant glanced at her, then looked away, almost as if suspicious or dismissive. Serena shrugged it off. She had every right to be here, and she had the ticket to prove it. She handed over her boarding pass, received a polite but curt nod from the gate agent, and proceeded down the jet bridge. The moment Serena stepped onto the plane, she caught the sterile yet comforting smell of airline cabins, an odd mix of coffee, air freshener, and recycled oxygen. A flight attendant at the door flashed her a standard smile. "Welcome aboard," she said, not bothering to look at Serena's ticket or guide her toward her seat. Serena chalked it up to the typical pre-flight rush. She found her own way to the first-class cabin, carefully tucking her carry-on into the overhead bin. Once seated, Serena exhaled a satisfied breath. She glanced out the window, smiling to herself. If all went according to plan, she'd be in Los Angeles by early afternoon. Little did she know, her very presence in that seat was about to trigger a confrontation that would rattle the entire cabin. Serena settled into her plush first-class seat, which felt worlds apart from the cramped coach seats she was used to. She carefully removed a notebook from her carry-on, intending to jot down some last-minute ideas for her conference panel. A nearby passenger, an elderly man with kind, twinkling eyes, smiled at her. Serena returned the smile. Minutes later, a flight attendant with sharply styled hair and a forced smile stepped into the first-class cabin. Her name tag read Carla. She moved briskly, checking overhead bins and instructing passengers to buckle up. There was an air of precision in her movements, but also a palpable tension around her. It was as though she was constantly fighting an internal battle, trying to appear welcoming while her eyes said otherwise. When Carla approached Serena's row, her gaze flickered towards Serena's face for a moment, then seemed to scan her outfit and carry-on bag. "Ma'am, are you settled in?" she asked, but her tone bordered on hostility rather than hospitality. Serena gave a polite nod. "Yes, thank you." Carla continued down the aisle, but not without a lingering glance at Serena. Something in Carla's eyes felt like a silent challenge, a wordless statement that Serena shouldn't get too comfortable. Serena had seen that look before, too many times to count. But she tried not to assume the worst. Maybe Carla was just stressed, Serena told herself. A few more passengers boarded, one of them a well-dressed woman who took the seat next to Serena. Within minutes, Carla returned. She began offering beverages to first-class passengers as they settled in. When she got to Serena's row, she served Serena's seatmate with a bright smile. Then she turned to Serena, the smile fading as if controlled by a switch. "Would you like a drink, ma'am?" Carla asked stiffly. "I'll have a cup of green tea, if possible," Serena replied, her voice measured. Carla pressed her lips together. "We only have black tea at the moment," she stated, not offering any alternatives. Serena noticed that Carla had just served a different kind of herbal tea to the passenger in front of them, but she decided not to make a scene. "That's fine," Serena said calmly. "Black tea would be nice." Carla nodded but didn't move right away. She stood there, gaze narrowing. "You know, this is a first-class seat," Carla said under her breath, her words colored with insinuation. Serena raised an eyebrow. "Yes, I'm aware." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Carla turned and walked away to fetch the tea. Serena felt her pulse quicken. She wondered if she'd done something to offend Carla. The logical side of her brain told her to ignore it. After all, Carla could just be having a bad day. Still, Serena's instincts and her lived experiences warned her that this might be something more than a frazzled flight attendant. Carla returned with the tea, placing it on Serena's tray with a bit more force than necessary. Serena carefully lifted the steaming cup to her lips and sipped, trying to maintain composure. But she couldn't help catching the look Carla shot her before exiting the cabin. It was the kind of glance that said, "I'm watching you." As Serena stared at her tea, a slight tremor of anger and hurt coursed through her. She tried to brush it off. This was supposed to be a celebratory moment, a testament to her hard work. She had a right to be here. Nobody was going to take that from her, not even a rude flight attendant. But Serena also knew her own weakness. She was rarely able to turn away from injustice, big or small. That was why she joined law enforcement in the first place. If Carla's behavior escalated beyond rudeness, Serena was prepared to stand her ground. She just hoped it wouldn't come to that. As the plane taxied away from the gate, Serena hoped the awkward initial exchange was a one-off. She buckled her seatbelt and inhaled deeply, focusing on the hum of the engines. The captain welcomed everyone on board and went through the usual safety announcements. Serena allowed herself to relax slightly. Perhaps Carla's tension was a fleeting moment of stress. Once the aircraft was in the air, Carla and another flight attendant began the first-class meal service. Serena watched them move gracefully through the aisle, delivering trays of food and pouring drinks. Her seatmate complimented Carla on her earrings, and Carla responded with an overly sweet laugh. Yet when Carla reached Serena, the temperature seemed to drop. Serena noticed Carla's eyes skimming over Serena's attire again, a simple yet professional blazer and slacks. She saw Carla looking at her closed badge holder, which Serena always carried in her jacket's inside pocket. The gold embossed emblem was partially visible, though Serena usually tried to keep her job under wraps unless it was absolutely necessary. Chicken or pasta? Carla asked tersely, not bothering to add a please or thank you. I'll have the chicken, Serena replied, matching Carla's curt tone with her own composure. Carla set down the tray a bit too quickly, causing the silverware to clatter. Serena inhaled slowly, pressing her lips together. She could almost hear her father's voice in her head, reminding her that people's prejudices were rarely her fault, but that her reaction to them defined her character. She decided to give Carla one last benefit of the doubt. "Excuse me," Serena said politely, "is everything okay? You seem a bit tense." Carla looked taken aback by the question. She paused, as if deciding how candid to be. Finally, she responded in a hushed voice, "I'm fine, ma'am," but the undertone suggested annoyance at Serena's inquiry. Then Carla turned to serve the other passengers, leaving Serena with a sour taste in her mouth that had nothing to do with the meal. Trying to salvage the flight, Serena diverted her attention to her notes for the upcoming conference. She wrote down bullet points about systemic bias, potential legislative reforms, and the importance of community-police relationships. But she couldn't fully concentrate. Carla's hostility weighed on her mind. She was used to subtle discrimination, side eyes, presumptive questions, condescending tones, but having it happen so blatantly in a first-class cabin felt like an insult to everything she'd worked for. She reminded herself that her worth was not tethered to Carla's opinion. Halfway through the flight, Serena decided to take a quick restroom break. As she made her way back to her seat, she heard Carla whispering to the other flight attendant near the galley. "She can't possibly afford that seat," Carla hissed. Serena's steps slowed. She wasn't sure if she was meant to hear it, but there it was, clear as day. The other attendant murmured something inaudible in response. Serena's heartbeat throbbed in her ears. She'd heard enough. Normally, she might have let it slide. People's ignorance was their own problem. But this time, something inside her snapped. She had earned that seat. She deserved respect. Swallowing her anger, Serena walked back to her seat and tried to calm herself. There was a process to things, she reminded herself. Confronting Carla in anger wouldn't help. If it escalated, Serena could escalate in a more official capacity. Her mind spun with potential responses, but she settled on one truth. If Carla pushed her further, Serena would respond in a way that left no doubt about who she was and what she was entitled to. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing mild turbulence ahead. The seatbelt light flickered on, and Serena fastened her belt. She closed her eyes, trying to focus on the gentle rocking of the plane rather than the roiling turmoil in her stomach. The next hour would test her patience and eventually lead to a confrontation that neither she nor Carla would ever forget. By the time the plane hit the predicted turbulence, the tension between Serena and Carla had reached a quiet boil. Serena could sense Carla's eyes on her more than once, as if searching for an excuse to call her out. Serena remained composed, reminding herself of her own professional training, remain calm, gather facts, and address problems methodically. Finally, the seatbelt sign was turned off and passengers began to move about. Carla passed by Serena's row again, checking on a passenger who had rung the attendant call button. Serena took a chance. She calmly said, "Excuse me," to get Carla's attention. Carla paused, turning with that same tight-lipped expression. "Yes, ma'am?" Serena spoke softly, aware of the other passengers who might overhear. "I overheard something that sounded like you doubting my ability to afford this seat. Is there a problem?" Carla's eyes flickered, momentarily betraying her shock that Serena had confronted her. She quickly squared her shoulders. "I don't know what you're talking about, ma'am. I'm simply doing my job." Serena nodded. "I understand. I'm not trying to cause trouble. But your tone and comments suggest there's some tension here. I'd like to resolve it." Carla forced a tight smile. "There is no tension on my part, ma'am. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other passengers to attend to." Serena sensed stonewalling. She decided not to push further at that moment. Instead, she offered a polite nod and allowed Carla to continue down the aisle. The other flight attendant, a middle-aged man named Marcus, approached Serena a few minutes later. "Is everything all right, Miss Walker? Can I get you anything else?" he asked, his tone kind and professional. Serena shook her head. "I'm fine, thank you. But I'm wondering if there's some issue with your colleague. I don't want to make a scene." Marcus glanced toward Carla, who was busy stowing a service cart. He looked torn. "Let's just say she's had a rough day. I apologize if you felt uncomfortable. Please let me know if you need anything at all." Serena offered a faint smile. "I appreciate that. Thank you." Marcus's empathy put Serena at ease. At least temporarily. She returned to her notes, trying to distract herself, but her mind kept drifting back to the bizarre tension with Carla. She replayed every microaggression, every sidelong glance. She silently promised herself that if Carla pushed further, she would address it head-on. Not long after, Serena noticed Carla approaching her row again. This time, Carla paused in front of Serena's seat. "Ma'am," she said, her voice higher-pitched than before, "I need to verify something regarding your ticket." Serena felt a flash of irritation. "My ticket? You scanned it at the gate already?" Carla folded her arms. "Yes, but we've had some discrepancies. May I please see your boarding pass again?" Serena furrowed her brow. She'd never heard of such a request mid-flight, especially after the ticket was already verified. Still, Serena calmly reached for her boarding pass, which she had tucked into the seat back pocket. She handed it to Carla, who examined it closely, her lips pursed. Carla's eyes moved from the boarding pass to Serena and back again. Finally, she let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Interesting," she said, handing it back. "I guess it's valid, but it's unusual, that's all." Serena's chest felt tight with growing anger. "What's unusual?" Carla shrugged. "Nothing, ma'am," she said, turning to go. But then, as if she couldn't help herself, she added in a low voice, "Just not something you see every day." Serena's fists clenched. She decided enough was enough. Before Carla could step away, Serena spoke firmly. "Could you clarify what exactly you don't see every day?" Carla exhaled, as though exasperated. She glanced at Serena's seatmate, who was clearly listening by now, and then leaned in so only Serena could hear. "A young lady like you flying first class." "That's all," she said, with a hint of condescension that ignited a fire in Serena's gut. A hush seemed to descend on the surrounding seats, as though the row itself had turned into a spotlight. Serena took a measured breath. This was the moment. Her father's voice resonated in her mind again, reminding her of the grace that defined her upbringing. She could blow up, or she could show Carla exactly how wrong she was in a controlled, deliberate way. Serena chose the latter. Carefully, she reached into her jacket and pulled out a small badge holder. She opened it, revealing her federal badge. "And this is something you also don't see every day?" she asked softly, her voice steady. Carla's eyes went wide, the color draining from her face. In that instant, Serena knew there was no going back. This wasn't just a rude flight attendant anymore. This was a blatant challenge to her worth, and Serena had just laid her identity bare in a place she never intended to. The confrontation had truly begun. For a moment, Carla stood frozen. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The gleaming badge in Serena's hand spoke volumes. It was a symbol of authority and respect, two qualities Carla had been withholding from Serena since the start of the flight. Passengers nearby leaned in, sensing that something was unfolding in their midst. Serena didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her calm, assertive tone cut through the tension like a blade. "Is there a problem, Miss Carla?" Serena asked, the question laced with a quiet power. Carla's face flushed. I didn't realize," she stammered, struggling to find her words. "I was just doing my job." "You have to understand," Serena's seatmate, who had watched the exchange in dismay, finally spoke up. "I think it's pretty clear you were singling her out. There's no excuse for that, whether she's law enforcement or not." A sense of solidarity began to ripple through the front cabin. Another passenger chimed in. "I've been on plenty of flights, and I've never seen a flight attendant demand to recheck a first-class ticket mid-flight." A few heads nodded in agreement. Marcus, the other flight attendant, appeared, having noticed the commotion. "Is everything all right?" he asked, looking worried. When his eyes fell on Serena's badge, understanding flickered across his features. He placed a gentle hand on Carla's shoulder, as if to calm her. Serena took a deep breath and closed the badge holder. She looked Carla square in the eye. "It's not just about my job, it's about respect. You've treated me differently since I boarded this plane. If there's a legitimate reason for that, I'd like to hear it. Otherwise, I'd appreciate the dignity every first-class passenger is entitled to, regardless of their background or skin color." A hush fell over the cabin. Carla's cheeks grew even redder. She stumbled over an apology. "I'm sorry if I offended you, ma'am," she said, but her eyes betrayed a mix of anger and embarrassment. She forced a smile at the nearby passengers, who still watched the confrontation with rapt attention. "I just thought. Sometimes we have upgrades that are unauthorized," and Serena narrowed her gaze. "So, you assumed I was one of those unauthorized upgrades? On what basis?" Carla didn't answer, but her silence spoke volumes. A swirl of shame, confusion, and indignation played out on her face. Marcus jumped in to defuse the situation. "Miss Walker, please accept my apologies on behalf of Delta Airlines. This is not how we treat our passengers. I'll see what I can do to make your flight more comfortable." Serena appreciated Marcus's attempt, but she wasn't ready to let Carla off the hook with a generic apology. "Thank you, Marcus. But Carla and I aren't done here. I'd like a genuine explanation. Or a genuine apology." Carla looked as though she wanted to be anywhere else. She glanced around at the sea of eyes on her. With visible reluctance, she said, I made an assumption I shouldn't have. It was a mistake." Serena could feel her anger still simmering, but she also recognized the precarious position Carla was now in. For a flight attendant to treat a passenger like this, especially a passenger who worked in federal law enforcement, had consequences. Serena hesitated, wondering whether to push for more accountability at that moment or to let the official channels handle it later. Eventually, she decided on the latter. Serena flipped the badge holder shut and tucked it back into her pocket. "I accept your apology, but this isn't over," she said coolly. "I'll be following up with the airline. This kind of discrimination isn't acceptable." Carla swallowed hard. Understood. Marcus attempted to usher Carla toward the galley, away from the growing crowd. Serena leaned back in her seat, feeling the adrenaline course through her veins. She wondered if she'd made the right choice by revealing her badge so openly. Ordinarily, she preferred to keep her occupation discreet to avoid unwanted attention, but in that moment it felt necessary. She wasn't just standing up for herself, she was standing up for every person who'd ever been undermined or judged by the color of their skin or the assumptions about their socio-economic status. The cabin returned to a semblance of normality, but the atmosphere remained charged. A few passengers gave Serena encouraging nods or mouthed words of support. The seatmate next to her turned and said in a low voice, "I'm sorry you had to go through that. That was completely uncalled for." Serena offered a small, grateful smile. "Thank you. I appreciate it." Yet in the back of her mind, Serena knew this might just be the beginning. She'd seen Carla's expression mortified, yes, but also resentful. If Carla felt cornered, she might do something irrational. Serena braced herself for whatever might come next, even as the plane soared high above the clouds, carrying them all toward Los Angeles and the aftermath of this mid-air confrontation. The rest of the flight took on a strange tension. Passengers in the first-class cabin alternated between staring at Serena and exchanging whispers with each other. Carla, mortified and nursing her bruised ego, mostly avoided Serena's row. She busied herself with tasks in the galley, occasionally stepping into the main cabin, but making sure never to cross paths with Serena. Marcus, on the other hand, checked on Serena with apologetic eyes, offering extra snacks and refreshments in an attempt to smooth things over. Serena, drained from the emotional toll, tried to refocus on her notes for the conference, but she found herself replaying Carla's words over and over in her mind. "You can't possibly afford that seat." The insinuation stung because it echoed a broader societal bias she had fought against her entire life, the assumption that a black woman in a position of comfort or success must be there by mistake or deceit. As they neared the end of the flight, the captain announced the initial descent into Los Angeles. Serena glanced out the window, seeing the sprawling cityscape come into view. This was supposed to be her moment of mental preparation, a time to gather her thoughts for the panel. Instead, she felt like she had just walked out of an interrogation. The fatigue weighed heavily, but a fire still burned inside her. She resolved to file a formal complaint, not just for herself, but to highlight a pattern of behavior that might affect countless other passengers. Moments before the seatbelt sign was turned on, Marcus approached Serena discreetly. "Miss Walker, I just wanted to let you know that my supervisor has been informed of the incident. If you need any assistance or wish to discuss it further, we can arrange for an airline representative to meet you at the gate." Serena looked up from her notepad. "Thank you, Marcus. I think that might be a good idea. I appreciate your help." Marcus nodded, relief evident on his face. "I'm so sorry this happened on our flight." Soon, the plane touched down with a jolt, the engines roaring as the pilot expertly guided the aircraft onto the runway. As the plane taxied to the gate, Serena's phone buzzed. She'd switched it off airplane mode. A barrage of emails, messages, and social media notifications flooded in. One of her colleagues, also attending the conference, texted her about an informal dinner with key stakeholders. Serena sighed, forcing her mind to pivot to her professional obligations. She had to be sharp for this conference and couldn't let Carla's ignorance derail her focus entirely. When the seatbelt sign dinged off, passengers stood to retrieve their overhead luggage. Serena remained seated for a moment, letting the crowd thin out. Carla was nowhere to be seen, likely avoiding any final confrontation. Marcus smiled at Serena, gesturing that she could exit whenever she was ready. As she stood to collect her carry-on, the older man in the row across from her gave her a respectful nod. "Good luck, miss," he said, his voice low and sincere. Serena nodded back, grateful for the support. Stepping off the plane, Serena felt the warm Los Angeles air invade the jet bridge. For a brief second, she paused to center herself, inhaling deeply. She was here. She had made it, even if the journey was marred by confrontation. Her next step was to meet the airline representative Marcus had mentioned. She wanted to document Carla's behavior, not just for her own sense of justice, but to ensure steps were taken to prevent this from happening to someone else. As she walked down the corridor toward the terminal, Serena could almost feel Carla's eyes on her from behind, even if Carla wasn't physically there. The confrontation had cast a shadow, one that Serena intended to burn away with truth and accountability. Little did she know, however, that this incident would spiral into something far larger and far-reaching than a mere complaint. Karma, it seemed, was already in motion. Once Serena entered the terminal, she spotted a sharply dressed woman holding a sign with her name on it. The woman introduced herself as Monique, a Delta Airlines customer relations representative. Monique led Serena to a more private area near the customer service desks, where they could talk without the prying ears of other travelers. After Serena recounted the incident in detail, Monique's expression shifted from professional courtesy to genuine concern. She took down Serena's account meticulously, asking clarifying questions and noting every detail of Carla's behavior, including the demand to recheck the ticket, the insinuations about Serena's financial status, and the overheard comment in the galley. "I want to apologize on behalf of Delta Airlines," Monique said, her eyes filled with remorse. "This isn't the service we strive to provide. We take these matters very seriously." Serena nodded. "I understand that you can't control every employee's personal bias, but I expect the airline to address it properly. I don't want just lip service." Monique assured Serena that an internal investigation would be launched. "Miss Walker, the first, will personally oversee this matter. Please feel free to reach out to me directly if you need any additional follow-up." Meanwhile, back on the plane, Carla was in a panicked state. She knew the confrontation had been public enough to attract attention from multiple passengers. She also knew that Serena was more than just an upset traveler. She was a federal agent who could escalate the situation. As the plane was cleaned and prepped for its next flight, Carla tried to collect herself in the galley, away from prying eyes. Marcus passed by and cast her a disapproving look. He didn't say anything, but his disappointment was palpable. Carla felt the weight of her actions bearing down on her. Her mind replayed the moment Serena flashed her badge, that feeling of utter shock, and how Carla had no immediate excuse for her behavior. She'd let her prejudice slip out in the most unprofessional way possible, and now she was bracing for the fallout. Minutes later, Carla's supervisor, a stern woman named Denise, boarded the plane. Denise motioned for Carla to step into the empty first-class cabin. Her tone was grave when she spoke. "Carla, I've just received a report of a very serious incident. You're going to have to come with me for questioning." Carla tried to remain stoic, but her eyes darted nervously. She followed Denise off the aircraft and into a small meeting room adjacent to the airline's offices in the terminal. There, Carla was asked to provide her version of events. She tried to downplay her comments, claiming she'd merely followed protocol about verifying tickets. But Denise's questions were direct, and Carla's evasive answers did little to exonerate her. After the interview, Carla was told to wait outside the office while Denise conferred with a higher-level manager. The wait felt interminable. Carla stared at the floor, wondering how she had let her bias sabotage her job. She thought about her mortgage, her bills, and how reliant she was on this steady paycheck. Panic rose within her, twisting her stomach. Eventually, Denise emerged, her expression unreadable. "We're suspending you pending further investigation," she said flatly. "Turn in your badge and airline ID." Carla's face fell. "Suspended," she echoed, her voice trembling. She wanted to argue, to plead her case, but the look on Denise's face made it clear there was no point. Carla mechanically handed over her credentials. "Someone from Human Resources will be in touch about next steps," Denise concluded, keeping her tone neutral but firm. She paused, then added in a softer voice, "This is a serious matter, Carla. I'd advise you to get a lawyer if it escalates." Carla felt as though the world had collapsed beneath her feet. She left the office in a daze, her career suddenly hanging in the balance because of an incident she had largely orchestrated herself. As she navigated the busy terminal, passers-by brushed past her, oblivious to her internal turmoil. Meanwhile, Serena was already on her way to the conference, her mind set on the next steps in her own journey. Neither woman knew how far the ripples of their confrontation would spread. But the immediate consequences were already clear. Carla was out of a job for now, and Serena was not about to let the matter rest. A few days later, Serena settled into her Los Angeles hotel room after an intense day at the conference. Her panel discussion on institutional bias in law enforcement had been a success, garnering positive feedback from community leaders and fellow officers alike. Still, she felt drained. The incident with Carla weighed on her, and she half expected a call or an email from Delta Airlines with a final resolution. Sure enough, as she was about to head out for a networking dinner, her phone buzzed. She recognized Monique's number. Serena answered, stepping out into the hallway for privacy. "Miss Walker, this is Monique from Delta. I wanted to personally update you on the status of our investigation," Monique said, her tone respectful. She explained that multiple passengers had corroborated Serena's account, and airline policies clearly outlined zero tolerance for discriminatory behavior. "The flight attendant in question has been suspended pending further review," Monique added. Serena leaned against the wall, exhaling a measured breath. She had suspected Carla would be reprimanded, but hearing it confirmed gave her a sense of vindication. "Thank you for letting me know," Serena said. "I hope you understand that this isn't just about me. It's about ensuring that kind of behavior doesn't happen again to anyone." Monique sounded earnest. "We truly appreciate your willingness to come forward. We are revisiting our training protocols to emphasize respect and inclusivity. We'd also like to offer you compensation for this incident, either in the form of flight vouchers or a partial refund on your ticket." Serena appreciated the gesture, but she was more interested in systemic change. "I'll consider the compensation, but what I really want is for the airline to review its diversity and sensitivity training. That's the best outcome." Monique assured her that Delta was taking steps to address the matter. Serena ended the call feeling cautiously optimistic. She knew large corporations often made promises that never fully materialized, but at least the airline acknowledged the problem. Later that night, as Serena dined with her colleagues at a trendy Los Angeles restaurant, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from a major news outlet. She opened the link and nearly dropped her fork. A headline read, "Flight attendant allegedly tells black federal agent she can't afford first-class suspension follows." Serena's face flushed. She had not expected the incident to make the news. Her colleagues, noticing her reaction, asked what was wrong. Serena explained briefly, and soon they were all reading the article on their phones. The story, it seemed, had spread beyond the confines of that single flight, igniting debates online about racial profiling and discrimination in service industries. Serena found herself at the center of a broader conversation she'd spent her life advocating for, but never anticipated being in quite this spotlight. After dinner, back in her hotel room, Serena scrolled through social media. The public response was mixed. Many condemned the flight attendant's actions, while a vocal minority accused Serena of playing the race card or claimed the story was exaggerated. Some called her a hero for speaking out, others hurled insults rooted in ignorance and hate. It reminded Serena of exactly why she worked so hard for reform and accountability, because biases, both hidden and overt, had real consequences. As Serena tried to get some rest that night, she wrestled with a swirl of emotions. She had come to Los Angeles to speak about systemic bias in law enforcement, yet it was a flight attendant's bias that thrust her into the headlines. Part of her wanted to retreat from the media storm. Another part recognized a unique opportunity to address discrimination in broader contexts. Perhaps she could turn this negative encounter into a teachable moment, not just for airlines, but for all service industries. Serena resolved not to shy away from the discussion. Her career had been built on shining a light where others might prefer darkness. This incident would be no different. She would use her voice, even if it came with uncomfortable scrutiny, to advocate for the respect and equality everyone deserved, no matter their race, rank, or seat assignment. Meanwhile, Carla's life took a downward spiral. After her suspension, she returned to her modest apartment in Queens, struggling with a mix of shame, fear, and resentment. She spent the days refreshing her email, waiting for word from Delta's HR department. When the email finally came, the subject line alone, termination of employment, made her stomach drop. According to the letter, the airline found her conduct in violation of multiple policies, including their anti-discrimination and ethics guidelines. Effective immediately, Carla was no longer a Delta employee. To add insult to injury, news outlets had picked up the story, though Carla's name hadn't been publicly disclosed yet. She felt paranoid stepping outside, convinced everyone knew she was the flight attendant who'd been fired for racist behavior. She tried to line up interviews with other airlines, but word had spread quickly in industry circles. Every interview ended with the same polite rejection, often veiling a sense of caution that she was a liability. Desperate, Carla considered switching industries entirely. She had some savings, but not enough to hold her over indefinitely. Anxiety and regret gnawed at her, but she also felt a stubborn indignation, an unwillingness to fully admit she had done anything wrong. To Carla's mind, she had just been doing her job, and Serena had blown things out of proportion. One afternoon, as Carla scrolled through her social media feeds, she stumbled on an article praising Serena Walker for her advocacy work. Photographs showed Serena at the Los Angeles conference, surrounded by other law enforcement officers and community leaders. Carla felt a twist in her gut. While her life was unraveling, Serena's star was rising. Out of morbid curiosity, Carla searched Serena's name further and discovered Serena's social media accounts were flooded with messages of support. "Stand with Serena" was trending in certain circles. Carla closed her laptop, bitterness coursing through her veins. In a moment of self-pity, she texted a friend who still worked at Delta, asking if there was any chance of reapplying after the scandal blew over. The friend's curt reply was that Carla was effectively blacklisted due to the nature of her termination. That single message hammered home how thoroughly she'd sabotaged her career with one act of prejudice. Across the country, Serena Walker was experiencing a whirlwind of a different kind. The conference ended successfully, and her panel discussion was lauded by activists and law enforcement officials alike for its nuanced approach to systemic reforms. Invitations to speak at other events began flooding in. Serena's higher-ups, impressed with how she handled the mid-flight altercation, hinted at a potential promotion. Though Serena remained humble, she recognized that her career trajectory had been boosted by the unfortunate incident. She wanted to use that momentum responsibly. In the weeks that followed, Serena found herself at roundtable discussions, media interviews, and law enforcement workshops. She carefully navigated each platform, ensuring the story was about broader issues of prejudice rather than just her personal ordeal. Whenever asked about the flight attendant, Serena responded with measured calm. She refrained from demonizing Carla, focusing instead on the structural and cultural biases that needed addressing. Behind the scenes, Serena quietly helped push Delta Airlines to revise its diversity training modules, offering input based on her own experiences and expertise. Though she received some pushback from more conservative corners, the airline's leadership recognized the PR nightmare they'd barely sidestepped. They were eager to show the public they were making changes. For Serena, the incident had become a catalyst, a stark reminder of why her work was so important. She resolved not to let Carla's actions define her, but rather to channel her frustration into constructive dialogue and policy changes. If one instance of blatant discrimination could spark so much attention, she reasoned, then the next steps would be to harness that attention for sustainable impact. While Carla struggled to find a new path, Serena's influence only grew. It was, in many ways, the embodiment of karma. Carla's prejudice had ignited a chain reaction that cost her livelihood. Serena's poise and refusal to stay silent had elevated her platform and furthered her mission. And the ripples of that flight would continue to shape both of their lives in ways neither had anticipated. Weeks later, Serena was in Atlanta for a brief visit with her parents. She hadn't taken a real break since the conference, and a home-cooked meal was exactly what she needed. Her mother fussed over the stove, preparing collard greens and cornbread, while her father asked Serena about her newfound visibility. "So, they're calling you to speak at events all over the country now?" he asked, his tone equal parts pride and concern. Serena nodded, taking a sip of sweet tea. "Yes, and I'm happy to help where I can, but I do worry about becoming overexposed, or people thinking I'm doing this just for attention." Her father shook his head, smiling gently. "You've never been one to chase the spotlight, Eb. People see your sincerity. That's why they're listening." As Serena helped set the table, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but decided to pick up. "Miss Walker, this is Randy Jacobs from the National Employment Law Journal. I wanted to get a quote regarding Carla's lawsuit against Delta Airlines." The voice on the other end said. Serena nearly dropped the phone. "Her lawsuit?" Randy explained that Carla had filed a wrongful termination suit, alleging that Delta had overreacted and used her as a scapegoat due to the public outcry over Serena's flight incident. Apparently, Carla's lawyers were also implying Serena had used her badge to intimidate Carla into losing her job. Serena felt a surge of anger and disbelief. She ended the call and brought her parents up to speed. True to her training, Serena decided to stay calm and gather facts. She immediately reached out to Monique at Delta, who confirmed that Carla had indeed initiated legal action. Monique assured Serena that Delta's legal team was confident Carla's claims wouldn't hold up in court, citing multiple eyewitness testimonies and policy violations. Still, it was jarring news. Serena had hoped Carla would reflect on her actions and move on, but now Carla was doubling down. The next few days were a whirlwind of phone calls with attorneys and statements to the press. Serena found herself in the uncomfortable position of being both witness and target. Carla's legal team tried to spin a narrative that Serena had abused her authority. Serena refused to be intimidated. She provided her account of events, along with statements from multiple passengers who confirmed the discrimination started long before Serena revealed her badge. When the case finally went to preliminary hearings, Serena took the stand. She testified clearly and succinctly, recounting Carla's remarks and behavior. The airline's attorneys presented logs, passenger statements, and even security footage from the boarding gate. Carla's team tried to poke holes in Serena's story, questioning why a federal agent would sit quietly before confronting Carla. Serena answered calmly, explaining she wanted to give Carla the benefit of the doubt until it became impossible to ignore her bias. By the end of the hearing, the judge made it clear that Carla's suit had little merit. Carla's final expression in court was a mixture of rage and despair. The case was dismissed, leaving Carla responsible for her own legal fees. Serena walked out of the courtroom, not triumphant, but relieved and resolute. She had stood up for herself and, in the process, highlighted how prejudice could ruin lives, both the targets and the perpetrators. Back at home, Serena allowed herself a rare moment of rest. She looked at her old collection of civil rights biographies, remembering her younger self and the endless why questions. She understood now that while the answers were complex, her role was straightforward: keep fighting for justice wherever she found injustice. That night, Serena sat down at her laptop to work on new policy proposals with a renewed sense of purpose. She didn't hate Carla, she pitied her. Carla's loss was a cautionary tale, a reminder that prejudice was a destructive force. As Serena closed her eyes to sleep, she felt at peace, knowing she had upheld the principles she'd cherished since childhood and that her voice, now more powerful than ever, would continue to champion those who couldn't fight for themselves. Just as Serena Walker used her moment of confrontation to advocate for broader change, so can we all when we encounter injustice, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. The story of a flight attendant who underestimated a determined black woman's rightful place in first class became a catalyst for discussions on discrimination, accountability, and compassion across industries. In the end, Carla's bias cost her dearly, while Serena's steadfast resolve propelled her onto an even bigger stage, proving that courage and truth can triumph over ignorance. If you found this story enlightening or inspiring, help us share its message. Like this video to show your support for Serena's stand against discrimination. Share it with friends and family who need a reminder of what can happen when we remain silent. And subscribe to this channel for more stories that reveal hard truths and celebrate real-life heroes who fight for justice. Your voice matters. Together, we can make a difference.